Ladies and gentlemen, if you could begin to take your seats, please. So we're a bit behind schedule. Hopefully we can make it up. We're going to begin this afternoon's program. This panel session is Building a Robust Medical Device and Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Base. And our moderator for this panel is Mr. Peter Lawyer, Senior Partner and Managing Director at the Boston Consulting Group. Peter?
Thank you. So good afternoon and welcome, Your Excellencies, honored guests, our gracious hosts who've put on a wonderful conference so far, and the sponsors, and of course my distinguished panelists. We have on my left His Excellency Dr. Hisham Al-Jadi, who is the CEO of the Saudi Food and Drug Administration. We have Omar Ishraq, who's the CEO of Medtronic. Mr. Fad Al-Rashid, the CEO of King Abdullah Economic City. And last but not least, Engineer Nizar Youssef Al-Hariri, who is the VP of Pharmaceuticals and Biotech Industry Cluster for the Ministry of Energy, Industry, and Mineral Resources. I'm Pete Lawyer. I'm a Senior Partner and Managing Director with the Boston Consulting Group. On behalf of my fellow panelists, I want to say welcome to today's panel. I started my career with BCG several decades ago, and I started out of our Chicago office. And one of my very first assignments was actually with the world renowned Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I remember distinctly getting off the airplane. And within about 5 minutes, I understood the impact of investment from the Middle East, specifically from Saudi Arabia, but from more broadly within the Middle East. It was at the airport, it was in the buildings, it was everywhere. You could really feel it, and it was transformative. Now, that was 30 years ago. And we live in a very, very different world today, and there's a lot of things that have changed, and yet there is substantial room for investment in the Saudi pharma and medtech manufacturing industry. This has the potential to be transformative, just as it was for the Mayo Clinic some decades ago. It has the potential to be transformative for the people of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for folks in the surrounding region, and of course also for the companies that make that investment. And I would submit to you, you just need to ask Jeff Immelt, who was talking about it from the point of view of GE, or Dennis Kogut, who was talking about it from the point of view of DaVita. There are magnificent opportunities available to folks who are willing to take that step. Today, we take up the question of building a robust pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturing base in the kingdom. Specifically, there's a national transformation plan underway that has some objectives in mind. One of them is to raise the amount of locally produced product in the pharmaceutical industry from about 20% to 40%. Another is to look at medical devices. I think you saw a slide earlier that said 98% of medical devices in the kingdom are actually imported. So there's much room to grow there. So with that in mind, I'll turn to my distinguished panelists and ask them to kick us off. Dr. Al-Jadi, if you would be so kind.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank the organizer for inviting the Saudi FDA to participate in this event. And I don't have slides, but I will invite you to visit our booth next to this hall to see and get more information about the Saudi FDA. What I'm planning to mention in this remarks regarding about the vision for the Saudi FDA and what we are trying to do to improve the investment in Saudi Arabia. And also then give some facts about the Saudi FDA. So basically the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, our mission is to improve health through regulating food, drug, medical devices, and also cosmetics, pesticide, and feeds. And the thinking about regulating is to really improve to have available products. And when talking about the pharmaceutical medical devices, our goal is to have available, effective, safe, and available and affordable products in the Saudi market. And this is very essential for us. And one of the key elements to achieve this goal is to have more investment and localization in terms of the manufacturing in Saudi Arabia, because of a lot of challenges of bringing products from outside the country. And in that, we can mention about few things that we are doing in the Saudi FDA and also in the future. So now in the Saudi FDA, we are planning for the third strategic planning for the Saudi FDA for the next 5 years. So the Saudi FDA, since started 12 years ago, built about putting the regulations. We followed different models, one of them the US FDA and also the different European agency in terms of regulation and procedures. And now we realize that having regulation, we need to streamline the processes for approving products and have it available in the country. One of the things that, one of the initiatives that we are working on is to improve the process and the time for approving the products. And we moved from taking, for example, appointments for 6 up to 8 months to now only 1 month, and from registering or having a response to pharmaceutical from 8-10 months. Now we are at the target of 2.5 months, and by the end of 2017, our target will be within 30 days we will have a response about the product. Different other things that's very complicated and important for the investor is the counterfeit, and it's a major problem in the world. One of the initiatives that the Saudi FDA started a few years ago was the track and trace program, and now it's in the pharmaceutical, which by this we can track all products available in the market, and we can really identify counterfeit medications and prevent that, and also save a lot in the cost. And we are planning also to move this to the medical devices and the cosmetics in the future. We also recognize with our colleagues, either from the government or from healthcare centers or from the universities, the importance of clinical research. And we have excellent facilities within Saudi Arabia, in different parts of Saudi Arabia, healthcare centers and research centers where they are able to conduct starting from phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. And that will facilitate the knowledge transfer and also building R&D inside the country. Talking about also some of the complications was for the secondary and primary packaging. Those who are doing this within Saudi Arabia, we had some challenges maybe with the bringing the products to Saudi Arabia with the custom, and I want to make sure that this is clear. This is resolved last week with the head of the director of a custom, and now it's clear that all these products will go inside Saudi Arabia with the responsibility to the Saudi FDA. Other things is working on the also working with the different airlines and authority in terms of the keeping products within the ports with the right temperature that's supposed to happen, and this is some work that we are moving with it at this moment. Plus, there are other things that some of you are aware about in terms of improving for the investment and localization. We have a list of essential medication, and we are trying to help in terms of having expedited process for registration and also exempting from some requirement for this essential list of medication to have it available. Shortage of medication is a key issue and challenge for us in Saudi Arabia, and we want to do whatever we can to prevent this from occurring. Other than that, also we are working with the with different authority, SAGIAN and also the national clusters, and with the King Abdullah Economic City and others to help if there is any need for the localization of manufacturing. And we'll look at it also. We look at it from pharmaceutical, medical devices, but also there is another opportunity which is the cosmetics, which can skincare products and different products, which has a large portion of the market in Saudi Arabia, and it's possible to build a facility for manufacturing and also have it available with maybe affordable cost. That's mainly what I wanted to mention, and I want to go back and talk about give some facts about the Saudi FDA. The Saudi FDA started 12 years ago. We have about 2,000 employees. All of them, they are Saudi, 100%. And we have about 400 of the employees, they were studied abroad, either in North America, Europe, Australia, and other places. With either training, fellowship, residency, master or PhD degrees. And we are reaching a good point in terms of the evaluation of products and moving with that more forward. We are hoping in the future to build more capacity in the clinical research and clinical trial, and also capacity in the risk management plan, and also pharmacovigilance and medication safety, in addition to expedite the process for approving products. By this, I will end my initial remarks and leave others for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Omar, can I turn to you now?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this conference. You know, I know the discussion is about manufacturing in Saudi Arabia, but let me give you some context as to what does it take for a company like Medtronic to view Saudi Arabia as an attractive place to do manufacturing and perhaps also engineering. First, as we've heard all morning, you know, Saudi Arabia may not be the world's largest market, but there's certainly things about it that make it very attractive and actionable. Amongst them is the high degree of and fairly sophisticated infrastructure that already exists in the form of world-class hospitals, world-class physicians, and that effort seems to be continuing. More hospitals, better equipment is being put in place. And as I mentioned, there are trained physicians with world-class capabilities who are well known. In addition, there's a government commitment towards healthcare. a clear direction that healthcare has to improve, and it's a matter of importance for the country. And we've heard about policies and innovative partnership opportunities and proposals, this morning, through which the government is engaged in helping and working with private corporations to facilitate this. Now, with all this being present and all these capabilities and facilities available in Saudi Arabia, at the end of the day, one has to use this infrastructure to provide better outcomes for patients. That linkage between infrastructure, training, government willingness, and the actual result has to be clear and one that's reachable. And I think that's a very important point. And to do that effectively, one has to provide access, one has to create a referral chain, but not just a generic referral chain, a referral chain which facilitates the achievement of a level of outcomes in patients with specific conditions. And this condition by condition, disease by disease approach, all the way from access to delivery to patient satisfaction, is the linkage that has to happen to use this infrastructure that you've invested in a more effective fashion. So with that, let me give you a little perspective of Medtronic, and then I'll say a few words about how we can play and perhaps partner with the kingdom in enhancing healthcare. Medtronic is a company with a variety of different therapies in the area of cardiology, in the area of diabetes, in surgical tools and minimally invasive surgery, in neurosurgery, as well as brain sort of neural care, things that we call neuromodulation and stimulation of the nervous system. So we have a wide variety of therapies, and therefore we see a wide variety of patients. We also tend to see them in a fairly acute state where they need help, and we have therapies through which they can actually get better and live longer. Our mission as a company is something that, our mission as a company is something that has been constant for us for over 50 years. And the mission is that, like you heard, we're a technology company, but it doesn't end there. We're a technology company that's focused on improving outcomes. And we're not done till the outcomes are improved, and that's why you heard me say so strongly right up front about the importance of identifying what the correct patient outcome is and reaching that. The words we use are alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life, but in the end, that's a nice way of saying we improve patients' outcomes through the use of our technology. That's what Medtronic is all about. Now, in today's world, to do that, there are three big needs that we see that connect all countries in the world. A continuous quest to improve outcomes. One must never forget that our desire to improve people's health in new ways through our learnings in technology will never go away. That desire will never go away, and we will continue to do new things as the years progress. At the same time, we need to be global and make sure that these new therapies are available to patients, to needy patients around the world everywhere. By way of example, just so that you understand the context, a Medtronic therapy affects the life of 2 patients every second. That means in the very time that I'll talk for you, maybe several hundred to 1,000 patients will be using a Medtronic therapy to save their lives. Unfortunately, that same number in Saudi Arabia is 2 patients a minute. That's a pretty frequent number, but compare it to 2 patients a second. And so that means that there's an access problem. That means people's lives can be saved are not being saved. People's lives can be extended are not being extended. And so the access problem is very big, and for that we need to be local and understand the local markets. And finally, there's a cost element to this. This all costs money, and it needs to be paid for. Which brings me to the next point, because healthcare, as you know, is viewed as an expensive cost burden. And the way around it, in our view, is to change healthcare from one that is paid for service to one that's paid for value. And what that means for us is that we're a company who now gets paid on technology with a promise to improve the outcome, to a company who's paid on the outcome itself. And that we can only do if we have effective partnerships, and that's why Saudi Arabia seems so attractive for us, because these partnerships are what will make this thing possible. As you go on this journey, the granularity of your approach is very important. How clearly you identify outcomes. Who are the patients you're treating? Because over-treating is only costly. It may not change the outcome, but it's costly. And then so you need a very granular approach towards this effort. We think about chronic care. Chronic care is the move to prevent escalation of a person's condition. It's like prevention in many ways, because it allows the patient to stay in their state of health. And then you have episodic care. When chronic care fails, you have to provide emergency treatment. And the analogy that was given before, saving the drowning person from the sea is episodic care. Keeping the person away from the sea is chronic care management. That's the right way to think about it. But, saving the person from the ocean may sound like a trivial exercise, but it certainly isn't. And what's even more important is that if you don't do it right and the patient goes back in the water, you've hurt yourself more. So good episodic care means treat the patient well, and the patient goes back into a chronic care state where he doesn't have to come back again. And chronic care management is to prevent that person from jumping in the water. That's the way we look at it. Now let me actually turn to Saudi Arabia itself and what we've done there in this journey. Our journey here is first in Saudi Arabia to be local and go direct. We've got a high degree of Saudi employees. We've got only 4 distributors, a very strong joint venture, so we consider ourselves direct in Saudi Arabia. And I gather some of the regulations are being modified to expedite that, and we welcome it. Second, we want to participate in episodic care in cardiology. We want to work in cardiology not only to build things and sell things, but to make sure patient outcomes are reached in a definable state. And we will hold ourselves accountable for that patient outcome to be reached at a certain cost. That's the kind of partnership we'd want. We'd want a partnership in diabetes, where we can do chronic care management to improve patients' lives so that their A1C, which is a diabetes metric, stays within range. And we have plans through which we can do that. We've done that in certain countries. We'd love to do that in Saudi Arabia. We'd like to work in obesity management. We've got methods through which we can do bariatric surgery, but in addition to bariatric surgery, we can go into models through which that patient's weight stays down over a period of time. And we hold ourselves accountable that not only do we do the surgery successfully, but we make sure that that outcome of that patient over a period of 5 years stays at the right level, at the right A1C level, at the right weight, and so on. Those are 3 examples of areas that we'd like to work with the Saudi government on. I think all the policy areas, such as the incentives to invest, the areas that we just heard about rapid approval cycles, those are all helpful and extremely important. But at the same time, healthcare policy has to be such that the consumption of the devices that we manufacture in Saudi Arabia reaches its ultimate limit. Otherwise, we cannot manufacture. The market's big enough for us to manufacture and certainly do engineering. But that has to be consumed in the country. And for it to be consumed in the country, we have to do these partnerships. Partnerships not just to buy and sell things, but partnerships through which patients' outcomes are improved. And if you do that, then you will be motivated to invest, we'll be motivated to invest, and I think we will go further and further, not only in manufacturing, but in actually developing technologies and doing engineering so that our technologies are customized for the needs of the Saudi population. We won't understand those needs unless we measure patient outcomes. That's why this end-to-end look at this market is so critical. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention and again, giving me time to speak here, and I expect we'll have a healthy dialogue later. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ishrak. Mr. Al-Rashid?
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I know what you're thinking. This guy is super handsome. But we won't be talking about me today, unfortunately. We'll be talking about cake. King Abdullah Economic City. You know why you call it cake? Everybody loves cake. Even if it has lots of sugar, everybody loves cake. I'm just kidding. I don't know how many of you have heard of cake. Can you raise your hand? If you are on the US side, the Saudis, please don't raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Okay. The rest of you, I'm sorry, you're going to have to hear about it again. today. So Cake was conceived in 2005 as a brand new city to be built 1 hour north of Jeddah on the Red Sea. How many of you have heard of the Red Sea? You know, it has 6,000 unique marine species. 44 are sharks. We don't talk about it, it's not good for tourism, so let's change the subject. No, but the idea of Cake was to build a brand new city as a public-private partnership, so completely private, with no government investment, with the objective of diversifying the Saudi economy away from oil, and engaging the private sector in investing in infrastructure and economic development, creating jobs, regional development, and it has been quite a unique experience. In a sense, the project is one of the largest in the world. It's a $100 billion investment over its lifetime. It will host 2 million people. Physically, it is the size of Washington, D.C. So it's really a landmark project in terms of its impact and quite unique in what it can deliver. Now, over the past 10 years, it has not been easy. I can promise you, we're here after lots of blood, sweat, and tears. And we have gone through a financial crisis in 2008 and the current economic challenges with the lower oil prices. But is the model working? And I can tell you that in just 10 years, despite all of the challenges, we will have today, by end of this year, the largest port in Saudi Arabia in King Abdullah Port with more than 4.5 million container capacity. We have the most successful non-oil industrial zone in the country with over 120 tenants from all around the world invested in King Abdullah Economic City. We are, although we are in a remote site, the most successful residential developer in terms of sales in the country. And despite the current economic environment, our revenues are growing at 44% per year. Now we are actually, as a city, we are listed in Saudi Arabia. So this is also the first publicly listed city in the world. And so all of our dirty laundry is on the internet. And so you can see all of what I'm saying seriously on our website. But one of the things that we have learned is to never say never. So in 2008, I've been doing this job for 10 years. In 2008, I met with our strategic consultants. It's a very, very large global strategy firm. I won't say the name, but it starts with an M. And they told us, they told me actually directly, Fahad, you cannot attract pharma investment into the country in terms of production. You just can't do it. You have no competitive advantage in Saudi Arabia for doing it. Well, 8 years later, we have a hub, the hub for pharma manufacturing in the region. In fact, we have Pfizer, Sanofi, and many of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world investing for the first time, not in Saudi Arabia, in the region, in Cake. And that goes a long way to say that we have delivered a product that I think is so attractive and that we can build on for the future. So how did we do it? We did it because we have leadership in His Excellency Dr. Tawfiq or His Excellency Dr. Hisham, who really support investment. So even if things are not clear, they make it clear for these investments. So they treat these investors with the kind of special care to attract them, but we also offer bespoke solutions. So there's nothing called that this is our product, take it or leave it. We actually design all our solutions, whether it's logistics, infrastructure, if you need reefers at the port, if you need special approvals on certain building types, we get it for that investor because we believe it's all about win-win. And now we're moving from just attracting manufacturing in healthcare to also service provision. And one of the biggest challenges for us was actually healthcare. Because we are, like I said, an hour away from Jeddah. So we have a limited population right now at 8,000, growing to 50,000 over the next 3 years. But it's hard to provide for that sector. We have developed every other sector. So port, industry, residential, as I said, but also leisure, education. But healthcare remained an enigma. That will change. Because now we're looking at all of the distance agnostic sectors in healthcare. What can we do that is so different that people will come to us? Now, we are not that disconnected. I don't mean to say that. We are actually connected by high-speed rail to Jeddah, Mecca, and Medina. So from Cake to Jeddah, it's 24 minutes. From Cake to Medina, it's 54 minutes. And to Mecca, it's 56 minutes. So we have 12 million people around us. So what can we do? So we decided to start with long-term rehabilitation, post-acute care, and also orthopedics, moving from there to cardiology and neurology. I learned all of this, by the way, this morning, so I'm bluffing my way here. But no, seriously, we have developed a full-fledged strategy, and now we are looking actually for partners. And we have some here. Dr. Mazen Faqih is here. Thank you for your partnership and for helping us run our primary care centers. But this is the strategy going forward for us. And we want to include also education, so a nursing and a teaching school. And so we have these plans laid out, and over the next 4 years, we will develop all of them to make Cake a destination for healthcare. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very inspiring and handsome to boot. So Mr. Engineer Al-Hariri, if you would say a few words as well.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This trick happened on the stage is gonna actually skip the joke I was gonna tell you, because I want everybody to be awake after a heavy lunch. So thank you very much for being here today. One of the things that you're gonna realize in my slides is how a lot of color, and that's, I hope, is gonna get your attention to go through it. You have been hearing a lot about this transformation program, our Vision 2030, and I thought, like, before going into the beef of the presentation, is to give you some idea of what is this National Transformation Project is about. First of all, I think when you look at all these logos, you can look at a unique opportunity for Saudi Arabia today, as all the government organizations are working under one roof, under one objective. So coming from the Ministry of Energy, Industry, and Minerals, today we're coming in a group, a big group with the MOH, with our colleagues in SAGIA, Saudi FDA, and we're all coming in one big harmony. And this is one of the biggest, I think, achievements this transformation program has delivered. It's actually tackling national security aspects. It's looking into technology transfer. It's looking about quality jobs, and I think this sector will develop that and deliver it. And also about localization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what happened since 2016? What is this transformation program is all about, and all these workshops and noise that we have been doing since last year? Giving you a sample of what we have seen during these workshops, we have came into issues regarding regulations, customs, payment delays that we heard about this morning, national security aspects about some shortage in drugs, and also some localization issues that we have to look into in deep. So is it really working? Have we done something between last year and this year? I'm going to give you just a small sample of what has been done. It's quite funny that I talk about Saudi FDA when the captain of Saudi FDA is sitting on stage, and he already has presented most of these successes, but this is things that we are really proud of, to see that these government agencies are going through and do it. And one of the things that happened, and we also heard about this morning, is the abridging and verification approvals of new drugs and biologics. Right now, the appointments, as Dr. Jadai said, is less than 3 weeks. They get a response in about now 3 months, and it's going to go to less than that. One of the major things that we finished just last week, and I know that companies that are working in the country are suffering from customs regulations. This is no more the case. Saudi FDA today is taking the full lead to clear all the medicines and the in vitro diagnostics to the country. Our customs today are reshaping. We have a mandate for them to clear things in 24 hours. These used to take weeks or even months. And now we're looking into also the lab samples. The mandate is to take it to less than 6 hours. And one of the most important things that maybe you guys who come to the country realize that even the immigration waiting lines are reducing to less than 10 minutes. And this to us was a very big issue before. Going through with what's coming next and we're looking at is we're really looking at to unify the industrial license procedures. We're looking into reviewing the duty exemption processes and have one national portal for our pharma and biopharma procurements so the government can know what we're buying and what we're importing and what we locally manufacture. The other very important component regarding financing, the government used to give 50% finance for industry that localized in the country. So now for strategic industries, we're giving 75%, and this is a big movement. And pharma is part of it. We used to give grace period for 2 years, now it's 4. And we used to repay this in 10 years, and now we're taking it to 15 plus. So this is a very big move for the pharma industry to really move it ahead in terms of localization. Regarding the investment ground, Saudi Arabia is compliant. We sit on the 38th position over 128 countries in terms of intellectual property. The nearest BRIC country to us is 17th position, and this is a fact. We're also part, as you know, with the WTO, TRIPS, WIPO, and also PCT. So from 154 countries registered in the Patent Corporate Treaty, Saudi Arabia is one of the 45 that actually have the electronic subscription to this, which actually raised our ranking from 1,000 applications in 2013 up to 3,000 applications in 2016. So, taking a quick glance about the MENA region and what's this is all about, why it's Saudi Arabia and why we're doing all this, let's say, information about investment in the country. When you look at the growth rates in North America, it's less than 2%, Europe about 0.5%, but when you go to emerging markets, we're talking about the 9% plus, and Saudi Arabia is in the area of other emerging markets at the circle. Taking another deep dive, when you look at the numbers, the country is capture actually 31% of the entire MENA region. The entire MENA region is like 21.4 billion, and Saudi Arabia alone is 6.7, provided that 2016 was a haircut year, which means that we were higher than this when the oil prices were even higher. But still, when you look at it, this is where Saudi Arabia is, 33 million, and we're the highest in terms of capture of the market. And when you talk about the second in line, that's Egypt at almost 92 plus million. And the market is going to grow between 9 to 10%, so we expect it to go to 9 billion in 2020. This is not an easy market. And when you look at it also deeper, you will find like the localization opportunity in Saudi Arabia is exceeding 70%. It's like 75% all imports. And for vaccines and biologics, that's 100% imports in Saudi Arabia. So looking at when we're here in Boston, as today we heard also, this is the world of biologics driving force. So United States and the EU 5 countries are 65% driving in spending in biologics, while United States alone is 50% driving force in the entire world. This market in 2015 was 230 billion, and the updates that we have, it's 275 billion in 2016, and it's expected to grow to 390 billion by 2020. So, when we look at what's going to be expiring in terms of patency, the best 10 biologic drugs are actually either expired or going to expire next year or by 2020, opening an opportunity of almost $80 billion by 2020. And this opportunity window will open a very good market for those who are interested to go and develop biosimilars. So when we look into the investment atmosphere, it is those countries who will invest in 2017 are going to make it to the market in 2020, and that's something very interesting and very important to us. Looking at the manufacturing map in Saudi Arabia, everything you see in green is generics and small molecules. Everything you see in yellow is either secondary packaging in biologics like vaccines or oncology, or maybe a company under construction, or maybe a company under development and studies. So the biopharma is very slow in Saudi Arabia. When you look at the blue boxes, these are actually active ingredients, APIs in small molecules. So in my opinion, from an industrial point of view, the infrastructure for the future medicine is very, very low in Saudi Arabia at the moment. So what's the plan? So we identified the priority sectors in Saudi Arabia, and they are vaccines, biologics, oral solids are still there, APIs, plasma, and injectables. And for the small molecules and APIs right now, we're doing a very big campaign of getting commodity companies like SABIC who are doing basic chemistry to move that from chemistry to pharma. And we are now completed phase 1, and we have an opportunity and taking it now to phase 2. So those American companies who are interested to take chemicals to pharma and niche products, please approach me after this presentation. I will talk further about it. And then we'll be announcing later this month a very big project in Saudi Arabia about a bioscience park, which will include vaccines, biosimilars, biologics, MABs, everything that is working in that space in Saudi Arabia. The location also will be announced later this month. And just a last message for all of you. What we think that with our vision and our transformation program, our country is moving fast. And with partnerships, I think we can move faster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Al-Hariri. If it's okay, I'm going to indulge myself with the moderator's privilege and ask a couple of questions before we open it up to the floor. And really, I want to pick up on what we just spoke about, right? Some of the priorities that you've identified. And I'm wondering, and this is really for the Saudi representatives on the panel, as you think about pressing needs that exist within the country and how those match up with given capabilities that you have, whether those are industrial or academic or other sorts of resources available to you, how do you see the priorities really unfolding? What are some of the things where you would say, boy, if I just had the following, company interested, we'd be ready to go. Anyone?
Everybody's looking at me, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to have to answer this. I think from the map I just showed about the structure of the pharmaceutical industry today, this industry started 30 years ago, so it's not, if I can say, in an infant stage from an underdeveloped country. It is developing, but I think we're just a little bit late on the structure. But coming here to Boston and looking at the biologics and the biopharma, I think the country now has to really move fast on shaping the regulatory aspects and also improving the clinical trials. I think if we get these two things moving into the next year or two, while we are building the industry, I think we're going to have a very good chance of meeting that industry standards.
Great. Yes. Your Excellency?
Maybe a comment. So I think now with the capability, we are ready for very clear with the generic and also using some of the capacity for manufacturing. So joint venture within the same manufacturing at this moment, and I heard several companies invest in this. So this is ready to go right now. When talking about biological and biosimilar and others, I think we need to build some capacity, especially in terms of the research component and the academic, to help with this moving forward.
Yep. An interesting fact I'm sure many of you saw, last week there was an announcement from Samsung that they've got a new biosimilar that was approved in the United States, a version of Remicade. And Samsung, big South Korean conglomerate, started that business in 2012. So they moved very, very quickly and have quite a business already with 6 products in the pipeline. So let me just ask one more question. This one I'll direct, Omar, to you. You talked a bit about value-based healthcare and the infrastructure requirement within the country. Earlier today, Jeff Immelt was saying, you get lots of advice as the CEO of a company, and ultimately, what is left for you is to determine when to follow that advice. And I'm just thinking through, from the point of view of a CEO of a major medical device company, what are the practical considerations before you'd be able to say, yep, this is a go. This is a country we want to put down manufacturing?
Well, if that's a specific question, we want to put down manufacturing, then we need to see line of sight for the stuff that we manufacture to be consumed. Simple as that. Just incentives to put manufacturing plants are not enough.
Yeah.
But if that's linked together with healthcare policy change, and equally a way in which the patients for whom we're manufacturing actually get that, and then with some assurance that they will get it, that's where we'll put the manufacturing. And we can help in creating the infrastructure through which patients can actually value that. But that's what we look at.
Yeah, within the country or outside the country as well?
Within the country, because outside the country, that country cannot influence the healthcare policy of another country. So it's best to start within one country. Otherwise, I think it's just, unless it's some kind of economic community or something like that. But in general, it's one country.
Great. Mr. Al-Rashid?
Well, I think this is the issue of the size of the market is a very important one. I mean, Saudi Arabia has 30 million people, and in terms of spend, it's the biggest in the region. But we should look at Saudi Arabia more as an anchor for the Red Sea region. The Red Sea region has 28 countries around the Red Sea that use it as a main trading hub. There are 650 million people now, growing to 1 billion people by 2030 and 1.5 billion people by 2050. So this is the next emerging market, the next China, the next India. And we should see the region as a whole as the potential opportunity with Saudi Arabia as anchor.
But again, if I may emphasize that point, because then the consumption in those different regions are all fragmented.
That's true.
And let's not underestimate, one of the things that we've learned, and I said that in passing, but it's an important point. I mentioned that Medtronic provides therapies to 2 patients every second around the world. That's the global average. Mm-hmm. In Saudi Arabia, it's 2 patients every minute. Okay? That's 60 times less. If you just close that gap in Saudi Arabia alone, that's a big market right there, enough to justify manufacturing. If you can provide access and healthcare policy to actually realize that difference.
Fantastic.
Can I comment? I agree with Dr. Omar, and I think it's 2 components. One is the incentives and making it streamlined regulation, whatever. And the other component is very important, which is commitment from the government and health policymaker for consumption for long term.
Yes.
I think that's very important. And we are working on the first one component in a good pace, but the second one is very essential, especially this is very important in the different products like vaccine and others.
Thank you. We have about 5.5 minutes left. Questions from the audience? I see one here, and if anyone else is ready, please queue yourselves up. Yep, thank you. Right in front as well. Please.
Beautiful panel. My name is Tony Tenori. I am originally from the Middle East, and I have a questions to Dr. Ajati and Dr. The handsome young man. So one question. I have been fortunate enough to develop a few technologies in my field. I'm a spine surgeon. I do minimally invasive spine, and I developed those with the J&J. And to me, it's very appealing because they go worldwide from day one of innovation. I'm very interested, let's say, what Saudi Arabia is doing on 2 fronts. One is now the regulatory environment is quite challenging in terms of patent infringements and so on. As a Saudi FDA, are you collaborating with the US FDA or the CE mark? And would an investor from outside, if I want to come in and develop something, we are working on some project now. would that go global? How can you help my product to go beyond the Saudi Arabia, which is that's number one question. And two, as non-Saudi, do I need a Saudi partner or do I need a kafil or something like that?
No, you don't need that.
Okay. Yeah. So for the first question about the medical device, I think.
Right.
So if it's approved in the in US or in Europe, also we have 5 countries. If it's approved there, and they have
No,
the US FDA.
My question was about a new product. Let's say if somebody wants to develop a new product and have a new idea,
Yeah.
and I want to go, I'm from the Middle East, I would love to develop it in the Middle East.
Okay.
And what can you do to help me also make sure that it's also help to be also US FDA or CE marks to have that
Okay. So to register within US FDA.
as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that makes it so that our threshold to go much better to go develop it in the region rather than doing the other way around.
Yeah. So we are working actually at this moment to have it registered within Saudi FDA, but then you can apply within the after that registration. Maybe you can apply with the US FDA or others.
So this will be a separate effort. So it'll go from me do separately rather than through the.
But if you register from the beginning at the US FDA, then that will be acceptable for us. We will not require from you another registration.
And about the partnership, do I need a partnership or a partner?
Today, Saudi Arabia offers 100% of foreign ownership for international, especially value-add investors such as yourselves. And we would love to host you in Cake. 5 years office for free.
I think we had a question right up front.
Hello, I'm Al-Fatani. I just have a question for actually the two here. If I'm an international,
Two handsome people.
very handsome. I'm going to wear the hat of a foreigner coming in and wanting to invest, and they look at this picture and they see a lovely land and they listen about the industrial clusters and they say, "Wow, what a great!" But I don't know the market. I don't know what's there. I've never been to Saudi Arabia. Haven't ever been done. Maybe I've done a little dabbling in Dubai and otherwise, but it's a completely different ballgame. What do you offer to investors who want to come in lean, who don't want to bring their offices with them, who want to see a system where the ecosystem is complete? What is the ecosystem that you have available to support foreign companies coming in? Especially that you're talking about a niche here. You're talking about healthcare. You're talking about biosimilars. You're talking about materials that are still not yet into this market, but have been available for quite a while in the country. So you're talking about EMEA had already worked with the Saudi FDA, it had worked with King Faisal on accrediting and approving biosimilars a decade ago. So how can you convince them? How can you tell them, we're there for you, this is what you'll get if you come and invest with us?
Thank you. A very great question. Thank you so much for asking it. I think, look, our experience has been when Pfizer comes to the region, they don't look at just Saudi. They look at every country. They look at every city, every solution. And so they make that decision lightly. So to choose Cake and then for the others to also support that choice and make their own decisions to come to Cake shows you that we have done something right. I think one of the ideas that we take on and the persona we take on when talking to a potential tenant is to say, listen, it's all about you, it's not about us. And what do we need? How can we give you a holistic solution that not only addresses your business needs, but also the needs of your employees, from education to healthcare to housing for all income levels? And I think that's a critical component of attracting companies and investors, because you want to also attract the talent that they have. And so we would work with you on whatever you need at whatever stage you are. And I know many of the government agencies, by the way, in the country are exceptionally supportive of new investments in this field. So you would find that Saudi Arabia, and the CEO of Davida was saying that it's maybe initially when you're doing something so innovative, it looks hard, but trust me, and I know this because I've seen it. Once you get there, after a year or two, it is an amazing opportunity that just keeps on growing and just giving back. So I urge you to consider it seriously.
We had one last question. I know we're redlining on time, but go ahead, one last question.
Hi, I'm Jeff Compricos with MSD with Merck. And my question, well, Peter, you talked about the example from Korea, so
Yep.
coming up very quickly. My question relates to competitiveness, and it's really to our Saudi official colleagues. You know, we've talked about Saudi Arabia as a G20 country. I think many of us in the sector believe Saudi Arabia could get into the P20, the pharmaceutical top 20. And we've seen countries around the world in recent years rise very quickly into the P20. Singapore, Ireland, now Korea. We also see places like Boston that stay competitive because they have policies driving their competitiveness. And my question to you is, do you feel we as an industry, it's kind of a feedback question, have we done a good enough job? Are we doing an adequate job sharing with you what we see around the world as global best practices, reasons why a country like Singapore goes from nothing in our sector to a top competitor? Do you want more of that from us? Is this useful to you? Are you hearing enough of it from us? Are there best practices that we should share more often and more fully? Thank you.
Panelists?
Okay, maybe I'll comment. I think what we had today and yesterday is a great opportunity for sharing all this information, and I think we need more of it. So if I can answer that, but I think it's a partnership, it's a discussion that I think a lot of pharma, they are interested in the market in Saudi Arabia, and I think so many different things and challenges that they had in other countries, it's similar at this moment in Saudi Arabia. So I think sharing all these experiences are very important, not only for the regulator or the people in the manufacturing, but also for the academic centers and the research centers.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank my panelists for a stimulating conversation, and thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick networking break. I'd ask you to be back here at 3:05 for the last panel session this afternoon. 3:05. Thank you.